everybody, and welcome to the Ultimate Job Search and Career Podcast with Bill, the company's expert. And in this episode, we're going to talk about how do they evaluate you in a job interview? What's actually going on in a job interview, and what are the different things that they're looking for and they're looking at, and what are they judging you on? So we're going to get into that. We're also going to take a couple of questions from viewers/listeners who have sent in some comments. We're going to briefly talk about how to answer the question, what is your weakness? And we're also going to talk about how to answer questions about moving expenses. So if they ask you on a job application or at any point during the hiring process, will you be needing support for moving? If you're going to be having any moving expenses, how should you answer? Okay, this was a question sent in, so we're going to get into all of that on today's episode. But first, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. You guys are awesome. I appreciate your attention. And I also appreciate all the people who send in questions because it gives me stuff to talk about. And that's awesome. It's also the things that you guys are wondering. I could just sort of guess at what people are wondering, but it's nice to get feedback, and then I know exactly what people are struggling with and what they need help with, and I can see if I can help where I can. Okay, let's get into it. So, first thing we're going to talk about is how do they evaluate you in a job interview? What do they look for? Well, I'm sure you've seen all the YouTube videos and you've seen all the internet articles written by recruiters on how to prepare for a job interview. And most of those involve how to answer specific job interview questions, right? Now, we've all heard the cliched standard questions like, tell me about yourself, and what are your strengths, and what are your weaknesses, and all that kind of stuff. So there's something like, I don't know, anywhere between 6 to 10 of those very common standard questions that it's a really good bet that you're going to be asked. So it's a good thing to rehearse and to prepare answers for those and practice them a few times so that you have them on the tip of your mind. So when they ask you these things, you don't have to panic. You don't have to frantically search for something to say and get all nervous. You pretty much have your answers worked out because practice makes perfect. The other aspect that I'm sure everybody knows are behavioral interview questions. This is where they ask you questions that start with, tell me about a time, right? Tell me about a time you had to deal with a problem. Tell me about a time that you had a conflict with your boss. What'd you do? Tell me about a time that you had to use creative thinking to solve a problem on the job. And so on, right? Now, I've done videos. Many people have done videos. There's a ton of information out there. Bottom line, for those questions, you still rehearse. You rehearse answers, except that what I recommend, and kind of what a lot of people recommend, is that you basically rehearse several success stories and several failure stories. You practice them. You practice saying them in a very compact way, usually using the STAR method, STAR, situation, task, action, result. I like to put a learning on the end, so situation, task, action, result, learning. And you have these on the tip of your mind so that any question they could ask where they want you to pull out a story, you pull out one of your stories, one of your 10 stories that you've rehearsed, and that can be adapted to answer any question they ask of you. Okay, so we've discussed that stuff before. There's a lot of other videos, but beyond that, it surprises a lot of people to learn that your technical skills are really not the mainstay of what they're looking for in a job interview. See, the idea is that if they call you in for an interview, then presumably you've already given them on your job application or on your resume the fact that you're qualified for the job. Okay, so they're not really concerned too much about your technical skills, because if you didn't show the required technical skills, then you wouldn't be at the interview, right? So if they have a job posting and it says, we're looking for somebody with this qualification and 5 years experience in this and this skill, you presumably have all of those. Everything that was really considered essential, you indicated in some way on your job application, okay? It doesn't make sense to interview people that don't have those absolute essentials. Okay, so you got those. So the fact that you're at the interview shows that they believe that from a technical point of view, you could do the job. The question now is, what are you like as a person? And that's what they want to see. Now, speaking as somebody that has hired quite a few people, I've been in companies where in my role, I was a hiring manager. And what I mean by that is that I was a manager of an area, usually in operations. And I realized that I needed to hire a person to do this particular task. Either we were expanding or the work was getting to be so great that we needed to hire extra people to handle all the workload and divide it up. So I would realize that, I needed to hire someone, and then I would initiate the hiring process. I'd go out and then find a person. And sometimes this was with the help of an internal HR person. Sometimes this was with the help of an external third-party recruiter, okay, that you pay money and then they find you candidates, right? So I've done both. Now, the idea is that you pay the recruiter to come up with a short list of candidates that look like they're qualified, and then you bring those people in for an interview. So you interview several people in succession. And the thing is, there's you would get a lot of different candidates that would have different things on their resume. Some might have more education, some might have more experience, some might have a sort of broader experience, some of them might have a more narrow but concentrated experience. And it's hard to really say just by looking at somebody's resume whether they would be great in the job or not, but what you can say is that they have potential. So you take your best guess, you narrow it down to a short list, and you bring those people in for an interview. And at that point, as far as you're concerned, any of those candidates could be the one, right? What you need now is to see what they're like as a person. And I've met all kinds. I've met some absolutely amazing people, and I've met some like really, really problematic people, So let's get into it. So beyond technical skills, they're basically evaluating you as a person. Okay, that's essentially soft skills. They're looking for big things like communication skills and collaboration skills. They're looking for more specific things like punctuality, how professional you are, how responsible you are, things like this. And, that's kind of really what the job interview is about. Okay. Now, the other thing that they're looking for in a job interview is they're looking for, first of all, obvious red flags to do with you as a person. Some examples of those would be things like if you come in and you're rude, or you have a bad temper or something like this, like you're noticeably agitated and frustrated with people or with the process. There's just something about you. You might have a chip on your shoulder. Anything like that. Those would be red flags, right? Now, there isn't a comprehensive list of these, but you can see what they're looking for. If someone has something that's like really a red flag with their personality, like for example, a candidate might look really good, but then you ask them a bunch of questions and they can never give you a straight answer to anything, that would be a red flag. Kind of also in the same vein, if the hiring manager or the recruiter asks the candidate a question and the candidate can never give an example of anything that they're ever talking about. Like, for example, they might say, they might ask a technical question. Have you performed this kind of work before? And the candidate might say, yes, I performed that work a ton of times before. Yeah. But they can't actually give you any specifics. They can't tell you how it's done. They can't tell you a story about when they did it. That may be a red flag right there. So this is the stuff that they're really evaluating you on when you get in a job interview. Okay. Now, one thing that organizations might have, and some of you guys, I know you've encountered this, it's they'll have their own specific wants, wills, or needs that relate to how they do things at that particular organization. And you're the outsider, so you don't know how they do stuff there. They're trying to guess. You're trying to guess. Let me give you an example. They could ask you a question. Say you're going for a job where you have a certain amount of responsibility, and let's say you're a supervisor or something. And one thing that a supervisor has to do is that if there's an issue that comes up that's of a certain type, it's a serious issue, then the supervisor has to know when to run it up the flagpole, when to get their boss involved, okay? For example, if it's a minor issue, maybe somebody didn't understand their work instructions, you don't have to escalate that. You could deal with the employee directly. You say, here's the problem. Here's what I need you to do. Does that make sense? Do you have any questions? And you take care of it. However, if you have a bigger issue, let's say an employee, one of the workers consistently didn't show up for work, or maybe a worker showed up for work drunk and got into an altercation with another worker. That's probably a bigger issue that might have to be escalated. The supervisor's superior, either a manager or someone, would have to get involved. Maybe even HR would have to get involved with that one, right? Or if there's property damage, or there's been an injury, a safety incident in the workplace. These are situations where a supervisor, in order for someone to be an effective supervisor, they would have to know at what point would you escalate an issue and what point would you not escalate an issue, and how to handle things appropriately, right? Now, as a lot of people can appreciate, different organizations handle this stuff slightly different, okay? They have their own organizational culture. Organizational culture means how things are done at that workplace, okay? Like how people behave, what the expectations are, how they talk to each other, how they handle things, all that kind of stuff, how things are done there. Right? And you guys know that different companies, they have different cultures. They have different ways of doing things, right? So the problem is sometimes that you get to a job interview and they'll ask you a question. They'll say like, okay, let me give you a scenario here. You show up for work, Mr. Supervisor, and you have an issue. A worker gets into a fist fight with another worker. How would you handle that? Like they're testing your abilities, your knowledge of the job. Now, maybe in one organization, they handle that one way. And then in another organization, they handle that completely differently. And you're almost expected to be a mind reader, and this is a problem, especially when you get recruiters that are employees of a company and managers, hiring managers that are employees of a company, and they've never worked anywhere else. So in their mind, the way they do it at their company is the only way anyone ever does it, right? Which is wrong, but that's what they think because they've never seen any other way of handling it. And then if you say the wrong thing, if you say something, well, this is how I handled it in my previous job, which is different to what these guys do, then they'll say, oh, well, you clearly don't understand, the basics of supervising, right? So there's little pitfalls like that. And if that happens, you can get eliminated from the running because you answered a certain way to these questions. But if that happens to you, I want you to know, first of all, it's absolutely no fault of yours, okay? Sometimes you get interviewers, a lot of times actually, that are just out to lunch. They have ridiculous expectations of candidates, okay? But these are the kinds of things that they're looking for. They're looking for, are you a quote-unquote fit with their culture, okay? That one you don't have too much control over. You either say what you've done in the past, in which case I would preface your answer with, I did this in the past. This is what I've done in the past. This is what my last employer required of me. That's kind of a safer way to say it. But other than that, there's not too much you can do. So that would be the one kind of exception where, there's not a lot of preparation for it. They're just looking for a certain type of person. And if you were to get eliminated on something like that, honestly, that's not a good employer. You might have had a lucky escape, because I don't think they would have really worked out. They would have expected you to be a mind reader on the job, and they wouldn't have had the realization that there's other ways of doing things, which is a bad place to work. Also, I'm going to address something that not many people address. And that is, in job interviews, what's the thing they always say? They always say, it's your time to brag a little, right? You don't want to be too humble and too shy when talking about your accomplishments and your skills and things on your resume, because you have to try and sell yourself. You have to try and say, like, look, I am the best candidate. I have all of this stuff, right? If you're too shy to mention it, that doesn't serve you well. However, here's the issue. You can easily go overboard with that and come across as arrogant. Okay. And if you're a candidate and you come across as arrogant, that's going to be a red flag for the interviewers a lot of times. So how do you know where that flip over occurs between I'm just sort of selling myself and it flips over into I'm being arrogant? Well, look, here's the deal. It's not so much what you say, it's how you say it. If you come in there and they ask you to talk about stuff, when you say what you've done, it's more what you say, or it's more how you say it than what you say. You want to be able to explain that you have certain things, but you don't want to come across as some kind of arrogant jerk. It's more of just having the people skills and the communication skills to know how to phrase this stuff. This is part of communication skills. So anyway, my point is that this is the stuff that they look for in job interviews. A lot of time preparing for job interviews is spent on how to answer technical questions, and how to answer standard job interview questions and behavioral interview questions. And those are important, okay? But if you're a candidate and you're doing job search right now and you're preparing yourself for interviews, okay, remember that the primary reason you're in the interview is not to test your technical skills, it's to test your soft skills, okay? Are you professional? Do they like you? Do they want to work with you? If they hired you, would they enjoy working with you? That's kind of the big question. And a lot of hiring managers, that's what's on the forefront of their mind, okay? When I was a hiring manager, I have to confess, that was on the forefront of my mind. Whoever I hire, I have to work with. And I got to work with on a daily basis. And in the beginning, I've got to train them. So I'm going to be interacting with them a lot. And if they're really, it's just not working on a personal level, or the candidate is very off-putting for some reason, that's going to be an issue. So being likable, being pleasant, these are very important in a job interview. If you want more information on this stuff, I have a couple of videos on my main YouTube channel, The Company's Expert. One's called How to Be Likable in an Interview. So just do a search for that if you're interested. I go into more detail about that. But that's really what's going on in a job interview. That's the first thing. Now, keep in mind that you could be, from a technical point of view, you could be Albert Einstein. You could be a genius. You could be extremely technically accomplished. But the problem is, if you're so off-putting as a person, you've got a scowl on your face. You look like you're really, really not enjoying yourself. You look like, you're really upset with the whole process. You look like you really don't want to be there. You act like you don't want to be there. And there's issues in talking to you. Either it comes across as awkward, or it comes across like your answers seem almost borderline offensive. Things like this, that's going to hold you back. Okay. It doesn't matter how technically accomplished you are. Nobody wants to work with somebody like that, unfortunately. In different industries and in different situations, the details are going to change of this stuff. Some people are more tolerant to things here and there. Other people are less tolerant of different things here and there. But generally speaking, the soft skills have to be there for them to want to hire you. Okay? So this is actually good news. If you get an interview and you're really nervous about, how to answer all these questions, just work on being likable and try to go in there and, be really pleasant to deal with and try to come across as, that you're as comfortable as possible. I know that's hard, but that's the way to go. Okay. And if you can do that, you will not be between jobs for very long, put it that way. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I know a couple of people were wondering that. I've gotten some questions about that in the past. But right now, we're going to move on. We've got a question, a really quick question, just very quickly. This is from No Brains. That's a great name, No Brains with a Z or Z if you're into that thing, that kind of thing. No Brains, or I'm going to call this person Mr. No Brains, says, "Hello, Mr. Bill. A question for you This is in response to the question, how to answer, what is your weakness?" Okay. So No Brain says, I have a fear of people, but I'm working on it. Is that a good answer? What about I sing in a choir, I train for a medic at Red Cross, I also voluntarily drive around old carless people to their business, I even go to the gym regularly. Mr. No Brains, you might want to work on your spelling. Gym is G-Y-M, not G-I-M. Spelling is very important, and correct grammar is very important if you're dealing with recruiters and hiring managers, by the way. Even in this interview, for which I prepared, is part of me working on it an acceptable answer to what is your weakness? Okay, let's answer this. Now, the answer that I recommend when somebody asks you, what is your weakness? Okay, the problem with this question is that if you give an actual weakness, they'll eliminate you. Despite what a lot of recruiters say, that's really actually what they do. So what you want to say is something good that you do, but it has this negative side effect. Like, I'm very friendly to people and I make sure everybody feels welcome, but unfortunately that can have issues with me completing things on time, something like that. But then I do this other good thing that fixes the problem. Now, honestly, Mr. No Brains, these are not, in my opinion, these are not really the greatest answers to what are your weakness. If this was for a very low level job, like we're talking entry level, we're talking minimum wage, these might work because, you're saying something and, there's no real red flags with anything you're saying. But if you're going for a more sophisticated job, these, in my opinion, wouldn't really fly. And the reason for that is because you're not showing how you've solved the problem. What you're saying is that you're working on it. So when you say here, I have a fear of people, but I'm working on it. I do this and I do that. I train as a medic for Red Cross. Well, what you've just told them is that you have a fear of people. And unfortunately, that's still the case because although you are working on it, you haven't overcome it yet. So you've basically told them, I have a fear of people. And that could be an issue. They could eliminate you based on hearing that, depending on, what they're looking for. Okay. So, or I sing in a choir. Only if you sing an extreme choir. That's what I would recommend. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I would not say kind of the stuff. I would say things that show that you have fixed the problem completely already. If this comes up, that's a bad thing, but I do this and then I fix it. And then you don't have to worry about it, right? That would be a better answer. That format would be a better answer. Not, I'm working on it, which suggests that it's still a problem that you haven't overcome yet, okay? Mr. No Brains goes on and says, a sub-question. I should not mention that I plan on taking a full leadership course at this and this private institution. What about public speaking courses? Well, okay, if you want to genuinely overcome a weakness, yes, leadership courses and public speaking courses may help. if you have weaknesses in terms of leadership and public speaking. But as an answer to the question, what is your weakness? Once again, that kind of falls under the same umbrella of you haven't really fixed the problem. You're still working on it, which means there's still a problem. And then the other ancillary issue this might bring up is, well, if we hire you, is it going to be an issue with all these courses you're taking? Like you might not be able to focus on your job. It might place too much demands on your time. So yeah, these aren't particularly good. I would stick to the format that I recommended and say I do this and it fixes the problem. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. Thank you to Mr. No Brains for sending that in. No Brains with a Z or Z, depending on your persuasion. Okay. So thank you very much. Now moving on, we have another question here that a viewer/listener sent in. This is from Julie Shah, S-H-A-H, Julie Shah. Julie says, when applying for jobs, they ask if you need moving expenses support or can you move yourself, what should one write? Okay, so I'm gathering that this is on some kind of job application. They're asking you, do you need moving expenses support or do you not need moving expenses support? What should you write? Well, okay, this is what I would say to that. First of all, this question really is another form of them asking, what are your salary requirements? It's the same type of question, and it's the same rules that apply, okay? The bottom line for this question, when they ask you, what are your salary requirements, I recommend 3-stage answer. First thing you do is you avoid the question. You say, well, I need more details. Second thing you do is, if that doesn't fly, is, ask them for the range. What is the range for this position? Whatever they say, you say, that's fine. And then the third thing that you say, if they insist upon pushing you further, is that they demand you give them a number. You give them a wide range, a reasonable number that's very low and a reasonable number that's very high. Anything between this and this, would be a possibility somewhere in there. Okay. The idea is that you don't want to talk about this stuff before they give you an offer. Okay. The only reason they're asking this question is so they can eliminate you. You want too much money? Okay. Well, you're eliminated. Right. And this is another form of this. Okay. They're asking about moving expenses. If you said, yes, I'll need $1 million in moving expense support, then you've just eliminated yourself. Right. Now, if they ask you this on a job application, which is what I'm implying you're referring to, that's another form of the question, what is your current salary? And then when they ask this on applications, a lot of times they make it such that you have to enter a number into the field, right? They make it so you can't skip the question. You have to enter something and you have to enter an exact number, right? They do that because, once again, they're not trying to satisfy you. They're trying to eliminate you if you ask for too much, right? So that's what I believe is going on here. If they're asking you this question before they've given you an offer, and especially if it's on a form or on an online form, okay, the question is, what should you write? Okay, well, I would give the same recommendation that I give for when somebody asks you, what is your current salary? And or what are your salary expectations? And that is that they're trying to eliminate you if your number is too high. So because you don't really know too much about the job, you know what they're looking for, and maybe a paragraph description of what the job is, but you don't really know the important stuff yet. You don't know the working conditions. You don't know the hours. You don't know if your boss is a jerk. You don't know, if your job description is going to change to include other things, et cetera, et cetera. You don't know any of that. So imagine that this job is perfect in every other way. It's your dream job in every other way. How much money would you need? Say an extremely low number. Okay. So if you don't know, I would even say 0. They're just trying to eliminate you before they even give you a chance. So if there's any chance that you would not have to move, if that is conceivable in any way, if there's a slight possibility of that, then I'd say I don't need any moving support. And that way you don't get eliminated. I mean, how are you supposed to know? They haven't given you any specifics on the job exactly. You don't know until you've really discussed it with them, what the deal is. So until you know the specifics, you want to keep it as open as possible. So if it were me, I would say if there was any possibility that I might not need moving expenses, even if it's like a 2% chance of that actually being the case, I would put, how much money do you need to move? I'd say 0. So that way you can get to an interview and then you can explore the job more. You can actually see what's involved. Okay. Okay. So the thing you got to remember for this stuff is anytime they're talking about money, it's very important when they ask you the question. If the question is, like I said at the beginning, they're asking this question purely to try and eliminate you. If they're asking this question at the same time as they present you with a job offer, or shortly before it, or shortly after it, then that's different. Then they might actually be trying to accommodate you. Okay? So bottom line for this is that the only time I would say anything other than 0 is if this question is accompanied with a job offer. Okay, get the job in hand, let them give you an offer, and then if it turns out you actually need money for moving expenses, at that point, say, I accept the job, thank you very much, only requirement is I need you to add X amount of money for moving expenses. Now that I understand exactly what I'm getting into, now that I've had some time to think about it, blah, 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 I've realized that I actually do need some moving support in the form of money, and it would be this much. Okay? Now, that's what I would do. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense for Julie Shaw. Thank you for sending in that question. If you want a more detailed explanation, I have a long video that talks all about salary negotiation and how to answer these various questions and how the whole process works. Okay. The thing is, they if they bring up money before they give you an offer, it's because they're trying to eliminate you. You do not want to discuss salary. You want to say absolutely anything you need to be non-committal and keep it open until you get an offer. And then when you get an offer, then you can talk about it seriously. You let them come up with a number, and then if it's not to your liking, you say, I accept on condition that number moves up. Change the number to this, and then you got a deal. I could start immediately, whatever. Okay, and that applies also to moving expenses. So hopefully that makes sense. So thank you to Julie Shaw. Thank you to everybody that sent in a question. You guys are awesome. I appreciate you listening this long. And special thanks to all my members of my YouTube channel on my main channel, The Company's Expert, and also to my Patreons. I'm on Patreon. I haven't talked about it too much, but I've got some great Patreons. So if you're into that kind of thing, if you're into Patreon, you can help support my channel by supporting it there. And all the money that I get for that is reinvested into making videos and buying better equipment and that kind of stuff. So that's always there. There's a link to my Patreon site in the description box of this video, so you could check that out. And also check out some of my courses, my Get Hired course. If you're looking to get hired, you're having problems in your job search, I walk you through absolutely everything you need to know about how to get a job. That's my Get Hired course. And I also have the latest course that I've come out with, which is the $100 MBA. So if you're looking for an MBA, Masters of Business Administration, and you want to learn the material in an MBA, but you don't want to go to school and spend 5 figures on this and take 2 years, I have an MBA. It's a non-accredited MBA, but it teaches you everything you would learn in a proper MBA at a university because we use the same textbooks. You read them at your convenience to the depth that you want, and there are no assignments or evaluations, and that's the advantage of doing it this way. So check that out if that's interesting to you. Thank you so much. You guys are awesome, and I will see you on the next video. Take care.